Ken Carson is one of the most electrifying artists in the current rage rap scene, and a massive reason for that is his insanely over-the-top production. So today I'm doing absolutely zero gatekeeping and delving into the insanity of Ken Carson's production. And this includes his Atlanta rap-inspired melodies, his insanely heavy drums, and the theme of internet horror that is prevalent not only in his aesthetic, but his production as well. So with that being said, the first aspect of his production that we're going to cover is the melodies. And for any kind of dark beats, you're going to want to start in some kind of minor scale. So for this beat, we're working in D sharp minor. Now, for the basis of your melody, you're going to want to start with some kind of synth pluck. And I find that Xenology is literally like the perfect VST for these kind of beats. So with that being said, you're going to want to throw down some kind of rhythm heavy pluck pattern. And for this pattern, we're making use of the root note of our scale, which is D sharp, as well as the 5 and the 6 of our scale, which are A sharp and B. Now, when you're working in a minor scale, your magic notes for like dark and sinister kind of beats are going to be the root or the 1, the 2, the 3, the 5, and the 6. And this is because those 2 and 3 and 5 and 6 are half-step intervals, meaning that the notes in the scale are one semitone away from each other. This does wonders for building suspense and tension within your melody and making them sound much more evil. So with that being said, this is what the basis of our melody sounds like. After you throw down some kind of synth pluck, you're gonna want to throw down some kind of organic Atlanta trap staple sounds. And this includes a super heavy brass spanning multiple octaves that yet again is making use of the 5 and the 6 of our scale, as well as the 2 and the 3 and the root note. As well as that, you're going to want to throw down some kind of staccato strings. Now, for this, I'm just using this arpeggiator patch that I made in Serum 2, which I named Star Made the Beat because it almost perfectly replicates those staccato strings that are very prevalent in Starboy's production. And I'll link it down in the description for you guys to use for free. But yeah, if you don't have Serum 2, you could just use Xenology or any kind of other staccato strings and just play a pattern similar to the pluck that we had before, but make sure it's playing in a high octave. And as well as that, another thing that you can make use of are going to be pianos. Now, typically Ken Carson's production is very synth heavy, but for this, I drew inspiration from Me and My Cup off of A Great Chaos, which plays a high piano pattern, which is super reminiscent of 2010's trap. And yet again, with this piano pattern, we're making use of the 1, the 2, the 3, and the 5, and the 6. And for that like crunchy octave sound, I'm using FabFilter Timeless on the octave up lo-fi delay preset. And something you're gonna wanna make use of if you don't want your beats to sound the same the whole way through is changing the octave of certain sounds in your melody. So this right here is our chorus. For the first part, I have our piano pattern playing the octave that I just played for you guys. And for the second part, I have it put up by an octave. This is something that's a relatively small change, but is gonna greatly assist in amplifying the energy of your beat. And now the final melody tip that I have is to add distortion onto your melody bus. So you're just going to want to group all of your melodies onto one bus just to make things easy. And you're going to want to throw down some kind of distortion plugin like Fruity Fast Distortion, Destructor, or in my case, Isotope Trash. And for this, I'm just using the Chip War preset. So without the distortion, this is what the melody sounds like. And with the distortion, this is what it sounds like. It just makes the melody sound much more gritty, which is perfect for what we're trying to achieve. So now that I've covered the melodic side of Ken Carson's production, I want to get into the next portion, which is his super heavy drums. And before I get into the drums, I want to mention that every single drum sound you hear in this beat is from my Deathbound drum kit. And that kit contains over 180 completely custom drum sounds, which were all made in Serum, which means that there are 0 recycled sounds. And when making this kit, I had in mind that it was specifically for those super loud and blown out type of beats, similar to Ken Carson and Playboi Carti. So if you like the drum sounds that you hear today, you can check it out in the description down below. But you guys aren't here to listen to me self-promote my kit. You guys are here to learn. So let's get into the drums. And the first and most prominent aspect of Ken Carson's drums are going to be these super loud, blown out 808s. And for your 808 patterns, you do not want to take any breaks. There's no moments of silence. You just want the gas on the floor the entire time. And as well as that, to keep things interesting, you can play around with octave inversions, as well as, yet again, making use of the 5 and the 6 of your scale. And then as well as that, you could throw down 808 rolls, though this this isn't super prevalent in Ken Carson's production. I just did it to make my 808 pattern sound more unique. As for the mixing on that, I just have down Fruity Fast Distortion on the B panel at around like 15% mix, as well as yet again Isotope Trash with the Dusty Bucket preset and at around like 15 to 20% on the mix. And now the second part of Ken Carson's drums that I want to go over are going to be the hi-hats. And there's nothing inherently interesting about the hi-hats, aside from the fact that they're playing a 16th note hi-hat pattern. This super fast hi-hat pattern is going to further add to the busyness and chaos of your beat. And if you want, you can play around with the velocity if you want it to sound more human, but I just have it stagnant the whole way through. And now the final thing that you're going to want to focus on as far as the drums go is making use of counter snare patterns that play those super classic snare rolls. And for these snare rolls, I like to have them on the last 2 bars of my pattern. And typically I like for them to start at a lower octave, make their way up, and then make their way back down. But this is one part of the beat that you can really go crazy with. Just have fun with these snare rolls. Do multiple snare rolls in one beat. Go crazy. Add like 1/6 beat snare rolls. Like, go nuts with it. Aside from that, I just have down things like claps and open hats, but those are relatively standard. It's not really unique to Ken Carson's production, so I'm not going to delve too deeply into it. But yeah, with that being said, this is what the drums sound like in their entirety. I want to mention that the only drum sound that has mixing on it is the 808. Everything else is just how it sounds fresh out of the kit. So if you have the right sound selection, you don't really need to do a whole lot of post-processing. So yeah, now that we've covered the melody and the drums, let's get into the last aspect of Ken Carson's production, which is his horror aesthetic. And you may think that this is something that isn't like able to be reflected in his production. It's more so like a visual aesthetic, but I'm going to show you 2 ways to make your beats sound much more sinister. The first of which is to use distorted soundscapes. And to make these soundscapes, you're just going to start with some kind of synth or pad. I'm just using this one from Serum 2, but it doesn't really matter what you use because we're going to distort it so heavily that you're not even going to be able to recognize it. And with this synth, you're just going to want to be playing the root note of your scale. That way your soundscape isn't clashing with your melody. And on this, you're going to want to throw down some kind of creative distortion. And yet again, I'm using Isotope Trash with the Broke Down Factory preset. Though if you don't have Isotope Trash, Fruity Destructor has some really cool experimental distortion presets. So this is what our soundscape sounds like. And the second way you can integrate some kind of horror aspects into your beats is the use of screams. Now, the Deathbound drum kit includes 10 horror screams that I just scoured the internet for. But if you have like a horror movie that you really like and there's a cool scream from it, you can just like sample that. So with that being said, I not only have this horror scream at the beginning to set the mood of our beat, but I also introduce it later on as a riser leading into our final chorus. And the way you could do that is just by reversing your horror scream sample, having the volume gradually fade in, and throwing down some reverb to give it a tail. So yeah, if you're making use of melodies in a minor scale, making use of synthetic plucks and organic Atlanta trap staple sounds, making use of super blown out heavy drums playing 16th note hi-hat patterns and making use of snare rolls, and integrating horror sound effects like distorted soundscapes and screams, this is what your final product should sound like. With that being said, that is going to completely cover the insanity of Ken Carson's production. I really hope you learned something new with today's kind of short tutorial, but if you have any questions at all, throw them in the comment section down below and I will do my best to answer them. As well as that, consider checking out my Patreon where you get both the FLP for this beat as well as the full raw, unedited video of me making this beat. That way, if you wanted to study the process it takes to make these kind of beats, the mixing, the mastering, the arrangement, what VSTs I used, all that kind of stuff is right at your fingertips. As well as that, consider subscribing as I post 1 tutorial a week and 1 sound kit a month. Other than that, it's gonna be it. Peace!